Good morning and welcome to Fashion News with me, your host, David M. Watts. I'm the host of Just a Fashion Minute podcast, and I'm delighted to be standing in for the wonderful Bernard, who is away this week. Well, what a week it's been in fashion, and to say it's been a roller coaster ride would be an understatement. Fashion musical chairs continues with more changes at top luxury fashion houses, and there is one absolute shocker coming up that you don't want to miss. Simone Botti, creative director of Bali, after only a few seasons, has exited the brand and was announced as the new creative director of Jil Sander, which is owned by the OTB Group. Dario Vitali was the design director of super cool brand Miu Miu and exited his role in January. It was just announced that he's the new chief creative officer of Versace, replacing the fashion icon herself, Donatella Versace. Demna Gvasalia, former creative director of Balenciaga, has exited the brand after 10 years and has been appointed, wait for it, the new creative director of Gucci. Nobody saw that coming. Today, I'm going to discuss all of these changes with my guests, Graciela Martin, fashion journalist, and Darren Skey, former buying director of Harvey Nichols Menswear and founder of Nieuway agency, a global retail consultancy. Welcome to the show, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So let's talk about what's been happening in fashion this week. The changes at the top. Darren, let's start with you. Simone Botti, former Bali, only there a few seasons, and now at Jil Sander. Did you know Belotti before he came to Bali?
Certainly not personally from my previous role, but obviously knew of him. But yeah, quite a big jump for him to become head of Belotti. But I think, I've only heard positive things of what he did there. Obviously taking over from rude creative designer Luigi Villaseñor, who I think had a bit of a troubled time there. But as far as I can see, I think Belotti had reversed those negative figures and provided some real positive growth for the brand in only a few seasons. I believe he had a pretty good time there, but I think it's all coincided with a change of ownership as well, or a change of CEO who left the business at a similar sort of time.
Yes, I believe that it's been bought by Regent, which is an American brand management company. I think they own Club Monaco and Escada. So it's interesting to see what they're going to do with Bali.
Yeah, it will be interesting. But I think it's an amazing appointment for him to go to Jil Sander. I think seeing what he's done at Bali for the last couple of seasons, I think puts him in really good stead for taking over that role. And I'm really interested to see what happens and whether he puts his own spin on the brand or whether he just continues the already good work that's been done there.
It's interesting because he actually was 16 years at Gucci. Mm-hmm. So it's been quite a change to go to Bali and then now to Jil Sander. So yes, it would be interesting to see what happens next. Gabriela, how do you feel about Simone Botti? Did you know him before Bali?
I heard about Belotti when he was appointed to Bali, and I think he's done really amazing work in just 4 seasons. He's made it really about the clothes, and it's originally like a Swiss brand and they were focused on footwear mostly, but he's also made like really beautiful everyday wear, like very luxurious, very refined without being like over the top. So he hit like a really good sweet spot, and I think the industry loves him. And I think I agree with Darren that it's very exciting to see what he's going to do at Jil Sander.
It's going to be an interesting change. I mean, I'm very much a fan of the Myers, Luke and Lucy, who've exited. So interesting to see where they go. But yeah, I think it's going to be an interesting time for him at Jil Sander and quite a new interesting gig, as we would say. Moving on, next in line, Dario Vitali. He was design director at Miu Miu. And of course, Miu Miu are having an amazing time. Sales are up phenomenally, part of the Prada group. Darren, did you know Dario Vitali? And how do you think he's going to do in his new role?
I think it's going to be very, very interesting to see how he does perform. There's 2 brands are completely polar opposites. How he's going to take that clean aesthetic that Miu Miu's known and loved for and translate that into Versace, which is bold print, the fleur-de-lis print. And I think that's going to be really interesting to see if he decides to tone that down slightly. But I mean, obviously, with the rumors that are floating around at the moment with the takeover of Versace, it makes a little bit of sense that if Prada do end up taking over Versace, then they have someone they know extremely well at the helm.
Yes, it's an interesting take. Graciela, let me talk to you about Dario, because obviously he's been appointed the new chief creative officer of Versace, and that news broke this week. So the icon herself, Donatella, has exited. It was her last show, which we didn't know. How do you think he's going to address turning Versace around? Because it's had a very dull period, hasn't it?
Yes. And regarding Donatella, I think there had been, from other journalists I read that had been covering this topic, a lot of them said that it was actually a good idea for Donatella to step down. And I think they were also waiting to see what was going to happen with the sale of Versace, since it was caught in that Capri, all that mess, that they didn't know what to do with it. And, because it needed like a fresh start, so to speak. I agree with a lot of what Darren said. He's been at Miu Miu. Miu is a very cool brand. They've been doing fantastically well, despite like all the luxury world just kind of crumbling. They've managed to just perform. And Versace is so different though, but also the fact that they appointed him, it's a little bit of a sign it seems like they're probably going to ink the deal very soon. So it kind of makes sense. It would be a little bit weird for them to be like, oh, no, we're not buying it now. We just want him, So I don't know. I think, they probably trust him. And they probably have a really good team behind. Yeah, maybe that's what Versace needs, like a little bit of a turnaround. It's like very contrasting aesthetics, but he seems to be like a very talented designer. He's been second, so we haven't seen what he's capable of doing on a lead role. So that will be very interesting to see for sure.
Yeah, stepping up to be, chief creative officer, although you will have a design team, and one suspects he'll probably bring some of the design team from Prada, which will be interesting if Prada do end up buying Versace. Yeah. So again, we're going to have a lot of designers moving around, but then a lot of designers have been exiting Prada, and they're all going on to other places, which is quite interesting. So Prada clearly have a good stable of designers. In terms of Donatella as I think she's going to be chief brand officer, do you think that's just a title, or do you think she'll actually have input in the designs, Darren?
I think she'll find it extremely hard to step away from what she's created over these years. I think she said that, I think in a recently quoted this last couple of days, about, how Versace is so deep in her heart and in her veins. And, I think for her to step back completely and give full reins, I think it's going to be very difficult for her. Mm-hmm. But I don't think anyone understands a brand any more than she does around. So it'll be interesting to see. I think, he needs to be given a little bit of space, a little bit of time to put his stamp on things. But at the same time, I think if I was her, I think I'd find it really hard to detach myself away from the whole situation.
I agree. It's very, it's still her baby after all, and taking over from her brother, from Gianni when he was killed. So it is a strange one. But, again, she's been 30 years, I think, something thereabouts.
27 years at the helm of the brand.
27 years at the helm. So it's like, maybe people were saying maybe it's time she kind of stepped away because, Versace has had a challenging time for the last couple of years. So we shall wait to see what Dario Vitali brings to the table. So our last designer shuffle is Demna Gvasalia of Balenciaga, now of Gucci. It was something that nobody saw coming, I think, across the entire fashion firmament. I don't think anybody could have predicted Demna was going to be the creative director of Gucci today. So in terms of what he's done at Balenciaga and in terms of what could he do for Gucci, firstly, Darren, how do you think about this appointment?
It's a bold appointment. And I think you're right. It shocked a lot of people. I don't think anyone put him anywhere near the top 5 that they would expect to get the job. The one thing you can say about him, he's turned the fortunes of a brand that was struggling. He's created some absolutely massive cultural moments. He reinvented the luxury fashion footwear, with the Triple S. So I think, what he's done there, he's created some amazing moments with Balenciaga. And I think, what Kering has seen is that there's someone who's going to come in and not just continue in the same way that the previous two designers have, is trying to put his spin on it and make it a little bit more culturally relevant. And that's one thing that I think he's got up his sleeves. And he's got proven track record of doing that. So do I think it's the safest appointment? Absolutely not. The Kering Group obviously know him from Balenciaga and trust him. And again, I think he has to be given a little bit of a free rein to put his stamp on things. But I think it's a really risky move, being quite honest.
Well, I see that actually after the news broke this week that the Kering share value fell by 11.5% on the Paris Bourse market. So clearly the financial institutions weren't necessarily impressed, but then they were probably reading, the WWD, Women's Wear Daily, and, the Times and Le Figaro. I mean, I think those financial analysts just read what everybody else does in fashion. And it just didn't seem to sit well. We shall see. Graciela, how do you feel about Demna at Gucci?
I mean, when I saw the news, I was like, oh my God, this is crazy, which I think is what a lot of people think. But then I thought, okay, I remembered when Phoebe Philo exited Celine and they appointed Slimane, who is very different designer. And people were also outraged, he's going to turn it into LA, California. And look, it was a different aesthetic. It was a different type of, design. But I mean, I think, they kept the bags and they kept all of those things, which are actually what sells. But he did really well. He did really, really well. So I think if a designer, I'm super skeptical, don't get me wrong. I am as skeptical as everyone else because I think it's just what is this? But, the guy knows how to sell. I think he's really good at that. And in a way, the way I see him, he's kind of a bit of a prankster because I think he does something really wild and crazy. And then he tries to test the limit of the customer to see, let's see what people are willing to buy with a Balenciaga logo on it, a bin bag and, destroyed sneakers, a towel. I mean, whatever wild thing.
I think that's a very interesting take. Now, personally, I think it's a very strange appointment. And I personally am not a fan of Balenciaga. But also, I don't think Balenciaga is doing as well as it used to. I mean, what Darren says, he was groundbreaking. But remember, that was 10 years ago. He was a 30-something designer that nobody had ever heard of, really. And I think, fashion needed a bit of a kick at that time, which it probably does now. Mm. So potentially, maybe the men in suits at Kering actually know something that we fashion people don't know. Maybe they are right to appoint him. Maybe he's going to shake up Gucci. I mean, we did say Gucci needed to have a revolution, not an evolution. Salvatore De Sarno wasn't the designer to do that, unfortunately. So maybe that is, maybe they see something that we all don't, and Demna could be the salvation of Gucci. A lot of people don't necessarily feel that right now, including the stock market, but, that's fashion. Yeah. Never a dull moment.
Yeah, he may surprise people. I don't know. But there was a collaboration between Gucci and Balenciaga a few years ago. It might be something that looks like that. He might do something entirely different.
And of course, now that also brings into question Balenciaga is going to be in need of a new creative director. Yeah. And I won't put you on the spot and say who might go into that role, but it's back to musical chairs again, isn't it? How we start the show today. It's extraordinary.
I did read on Lauren Sherman's newsletter because she's very up to date with all of this. I'm such a fan. She knows everything. She said that Riccardo Tisci had cleared his Instagram. So something's, I'm not saying he's going to Balenciaga, but something's up for sure. Something's happening. He's going somewhere.
But everybody's doing everything. I also heard Peter Mueller from Alaya could be in the frame. That came up this week as well. Yeah. So again, the speculation starts to turn around who could be the right person. Maybe in the same way that Gucci needs a huge shakeup. Balenciaga needs to go back to a much more traditional Saint Laurent type business. But is that really what we need now? Is that what fashion needs? Darren, you're shaking your
I
head.
think so. I think
What does Balenciaga need? Tell us.
everyone, you see what everyone's doing. Everyone's juxtaposing what was done before because luxury fashion is in the doldrums. Yeah, and the figures, absolutely back that up. So why continue doing the same thing? I think it's good to try and do a complete reversal. Albeit with a little bit of risk attached. But I think I've been told in the past by many CEOs is, if you continue doing the same thing when things are bad, then they're going to continue to be bad. But if you do something different, then you've got a chance of making something turn into a positive figure. So and learn your lessons. If things don't suddenly work, you tweak things. But if you don't change things, then you'll never know.
It's a very valid point. Do you think that this gives an opportunity to these big luxury houses to start looking at younger designers and new talent that's coming into the market? And when I say younger, bearing in mind, we've been talking about J.W. Anderson, who's a bit of a superstar, Matthew Blazy, who's a superstar going into Chanel, but they're both 40 already. So, younger is 27, 28, or at least in my book. So, I'm an old fogey, but, in terms of those new designers, do you think, Graciela, that we should be, or those brands should be looking at new designers?
Oh, for sure. There is so much amazing talent.
And we have a lot of British designers, women, Martine Rose, Grace Wales Bonner. They have done, and in some respects, they've also exceeded expectations. But I think Martine was even consulting with Demna at Balenciaga. And, and there was talk about her in terms of LV a while back. But, these designers are really not getting the attention, not getting the opportunities. And we seem to be defaulting back to, the same group of designers. It's the same 20 designers, really, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
So maybe fashion needs to take note and think about the new talent that's coming along.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you mentioned two there, Grace Wales Bonner and Martine Rose. I think they're two absolute standout candidates for any of these creative director roles. I think there have been discussions with those designers previously for those positions. And some like, Samuel Ross as well. Samuel Ross, who, was making cultural changes at a Cold Wall, worked very closely with Virgil as well. He could be ideal for something like Balenciaga, going in there and doing something that's, going along the same sort of lines, but with his own sort of structural, creative side that he so pushes.
Yes, because he's very much more about, structure, architecture, negative space, and, but also very clever and sort of utilitarian in an interesting way he did with the Cold Wall, and then has sold that on and is now doing another project by himself.
Well, you could go completely left wing and look at someone like Kirby Jean Raymond, who was at P.O. Moss previously. What he did, and it's the first black designer to do couture a few seasons back. But I think he'd be a great designer to come into one of these big houses and do something a little bit different and push those boundaries a little bit more. He's not a safe choice, but he's someone that would make people sit up and listen and take notice, and he's doing something different.
Amazing. So we need to be looking at new design talent, or the big fashion houses need to be looking at design talent and younger design talent and giving them opportunity. We're in agreement about that. Well, I'm sure everybody's going to be talking more about Demna and Gucci, and then Balenciaga. And then, of course, we have other news coming along. But we're coming to the end of the show. And I would just like to thank my guests today, Darren Skey and Graciela Martin.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for your insight and input. It's been really valuable. Thank you for watching Fashion News. It's been great to be here for Bernard today. We're taking a break next week, but we will be back the following Sunday. So 9 a.m. YouTube. Tune in, give us a like, and please subscribe. Thank you. Have a good week.